guys, today I want to show you 3 completely different ways to finish the back of your epoxy charcuterie boards. Now, these are 3 completely different ways and they all have their pros and cons, and I'm going to talk about that right now. The first way to finish your charcuterie board, the back of it that is just using oil and wax. The back of this ancient wood and epoxy board, that's all it has on it. It has some mineral oil and it has some beeswax on it. And we get this kind of matte look to it. And the pros of this is that the back of it, it's the raw wood. Well, you know, it has the oil on it and the wax, but you can feel the wood, you can feel the grain of the wood. And some people really like that. They don't, you know, want just a plasticky kind of charcuterie board. They want to feel the wood. So that is one way to finish it, and it gives it a really, really nice smooth finish, but there is some cons to it too. That means as you keep washing this board, the back of it, it will start to get dry. Just like any other cutting board, you'll have to keep reapplying the board butter, you know, like the wax, the oil, and so on. So there is some maintenance to it. So the pros on that is that you can feel the wood, you can feel the grain, but you do have to have some maintenance going on to keep it from drying up. If you don't maintain it and keep adding oil and wax and stuff, eventually it will either crack or warp, or, you know, bad things could happen. So let's move into the number 2. I have this other board over here that I just finished today. You can see very, very pretty board. And if you think you saw this board before, I know it looks like that, but that's because I had a piece of wood that I resawed, so I made 2 out of it. So I have one that is done and it's already on my website. And then this one, I just finished it today. Now, if we're looking at the back of this board, you can see it is a solid epoxy, this green epoxy. And if it looks a little bit blotchy in camera, it's just because I just put the oil on it. So the back of it is epoxy. The way I did this board is I prepare my mold as usual, and then I put a thin layer of green epoxy and I let it cure. Not completely. When it was almost cured, but it was still tacky, I took the wood and I put it on top of the epoxy in the mold. And because it was still tacky, it really stuck to it and it would not float to the top. Then I mixed my colors, epoxy, these ones that you see over here, and I poured the color epoxy on it. So that's the way this board ended up with the colored back. So what are the pros on doing this? Well, the wood is completely encapsulated in epoxy. That means no moisture can get inside, it won't warp, it won't crack, and there's no maintenance. There's just epoxy on the back. So this is another way to finish the back of your charcuterie boards. I did sand this, I sand it to 220, and then I added some mineral oil to get this result. So the pros on that is that it's really easy to do. It really, there's no maintenance to it. And the cons is that you don't see the wood anymore on the back, it's just epoxy. Now let's move into this board over here, which I just finished today. This is some beautiful quilted maple. And if you're interested in these boards, you can contact me. They will be on my website on maybe Sunday. I am taking them with me to an art show on Friday and Saturday. And if they don't sell, then I'll post them on my website. But this board over here, if we look on the back, it looks really, really nice. That's the back. I don't know how much the camera is focusing and what you can see, but that's the back of it. But it's not as shiny as the front. So how did I do this one? Well, this one I made it completely different. I did the board normally, like you put the wood in the mold, I put the green epoxy in there, and then when it was all cured, I sanded it, and then what I did is I put the tabletop epoxy on the back of it. So that's what is there. It's tabletop epoxy, so it's clear, so you can see the wood through it. And then the next day, I took the blue tape from the edges off and I sanded it. And this one is sanded to, well, first I sanded just to the 120 to get it flat. Then I put some blue tape on the edges, the part that I just did the tabletop epoxy, and I tabletopped the front and the sides. So you can see the front and the sides Super, super glossy, very nice shine. And then as you get to the back, it's still really nice, but it's not as glossy. And that is because once you're done with the tabletop, from the top and the sides, you end up with the drips on the back. So you do have to sand them to remove them. So because I had to sand it, now it's not glossy anymore. And I did sand it the back to 1500 grit. So super, super smooth, super nice. It's just not glossy like the front. So the pros on this method is that you can see the wood in the back, so it's not a solid color. The wood is completely enclosed, so you won't warp and you won't get any moisture in there. And also you do not have to keep oiling it, so it's maintenance free. Now the cons is it takes an extra day and a lot more work because you have to do the tabletop on the back. You have to wait a day for it to cure, then you have to like sand it and then move on. So it takes a longer time. So then you might ask yourself, can I use clear epoxy and do this method where I can just put clear onto the mold and then put the wood on top of it? Well, I don't think that was gonna work very well, and this is why. Once you have the epoxy and it's tacky, not cured, but tacky, you don't want it to be runny because then when you put the wood will sink. You do not want the wood to sink into your epoxy, you want to stay on top of it. So if you put clear and then you put your wood in there, if you have any kind of gaps and stuff, it will trap air bubbles. And because that epoxy is clear on the end, when you look in the back, you will see the air bubbles. So I don't think that's gonna be a good look versus if you have a solid epoxy, even if there are some air bubbles in there, well, we can't see it. So that will prevent that kind of look. So that's the downside of using clear epoxy in the mold. Now, when I do my crosses, this is two that I just finished today. I put the tabletop on the top, and on the back, they just get sanded and just a little bit of mineral oil, and they look something like that. So there you have it, 3 completely different methods for finishing the back of your epoxy charcuterie boards. I cannot say the one is better than the other. They're all different. They all have their own pros and cons, and it's just for you to decide which method is for you. I hope this was helpful to you and you learned something new. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Skylar Ewing, and I'll see you in my next video.